Testing, testing.
Who's the pretty boy? What's the pretty boy?
Cuckoo, coo, cuckoo, coo. Who forgot to sacrifice the pigeon?
Yeah. What do the trains say? Cuckoo.
I've got a big book here I can go through to find the. Ooh,
Okay.
Oh, we are live now.
third time's the
Okay.
charm. Sound. They can hear us.
All right. In fact, yeah, no, I'm hearing double there. Bear with me. Okay, there we go. So, well, we're live, and this is the second panel of VaesenCon 2024. Subject of this panel is the occult on the dark occult underbelly of 19th century Europe. And we'll be going over subjects such as history, myth, and folklore.
Now recording.
Within that framework. So I have with me three experts today who are going to be leading us through this discussion. I'm going to be throwing them questions and also potentially taking questions from the audience. Who am I? My name is Stephen Wall. I operate delapormedia.com, and which is an RPG blog focused on bringing verisimilitude to the tabletop, is how I like to look at it. As far as you can find me at delapormedia.com, you can also find at delapormedia, both on Blue Sky and on Twitter. And I also have an upcoming product coming out, the Somebody Think of the Children. It's a scenario book for Call of Cthulhu through the Miskatonic repository. But let's get to our important guests today. So first, I'm going to have these individuals introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, and tell you also where you can find them online. So let's begin with CJ. CJ, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. My name is Christian, better known as CJ. I have been playing RPG games for quite some time now. Especially Blade in the Dark and a lot of Vaesen. Yeah, I don't have a social presence. I'm only playing and have a big interest for occult history, especially North European history.
Okay, great. And of course, we can find you on the VaesenCon Discord, though.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Cussa, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever time you are watching this. I'm Cussa. I don't know exactly why I'm here, but basically there is some interesting things. Basically, I worked quite doing some things for Foundry. I did quite an overhaul on the Vaesen system for Foundry last year. Introduce all the automations basically that we have right now for rollings and this kind of thing. Continue to create some things for Foundry. Unfortunately, nothing for Vaesen as Freely does not allow that right now. Besides that, work as a developer, as working for things for Foundry, you can imagine. And there is another thing that it's quite interesting that could bring some value to this panel is that I have been studying the Norse runes for something like 22 years right now.
Okay.
So some small knowledge there that can chip in some ideas.
Well, I think those are three great reasons for you to be here.
Yeah, and the social media, basically you can find me by Kusamitri on basically Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Telegram, and you can find the things that I'm doing for Foundry on hotpub.com.
All right, great. And lastly, David, could you please introduce yourself?
David. I'm here because apparently I look the part, not for anything special. So hi, David. I'm the drunken storyteller on most social medias because there's a podcast that I do on folklore. I am out in Mexico, so it's kind of mid-afternoon. It's not too hot today, so I'm feeling quite good. But yeah, I also do a lot of RPG freelance writing or community content, and you can find that over on Drive Through RPG. That's the place it's called. There's a few Vesen stuff out there. I'm co-writer of the modern Vesen source book. So go check that out. It's a fun, different way to look at the world of Vesen. And I have a little bit of a passion for the occult and all things weird and spooky. A little bit more in kind of like the mid 15th century era. Not so much the more modern stuff, but more the historical side. So, yeah. And as I say, drunken storyteller on most socials.
All right, excellent. Well, folks, let's dive right into it here. This panel is about the occult underbelly of 19th century Europe. It's a couple of interesting words to put together, occult underbelly. So I'd like each of you in turn to discuss what sort of imagery or ideas that evokes when you hear those two words together, occult underbelly. And why don't we go in reverse order here? We'll start with David.
Oh, okay. So when I think of occult, I tend to take more of a kind of an academic view of it, not kind of like the modern movie period of it. So I look at the study of the philosophies and things. So when I think of occult underbelly, I mostly think of weird booksellers, like spooky bookshops, book collectors who are trying to find the most obscure, rare, magical tombs from Greek or Roman times, and trying to find all of these kind of classical ideas and bring them forward to modern things. So to me, occult underbelly, as much as I could kind of see maybe how you could kind of connect to a criminal idea, underbelly always kind of gives you that criminal thing. I see it as illicit book trades and buying forbidden magic tombs from this shop that only appears once every blue moon, under a blood moon, on a stormy night in the middle of September, on this specific street at this specific hour. A little bit Terry Pratchett-esque, I suppose. So for me, that's kind of where I would take it, rather than, I guess, what other people might view.
So antiquarians with poor business plans. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, academics.
Academics. Excellent. All right. Cussa, when we say the words occult underbelly together, what does that evoke for you? What did you immediately think of when you realized I'm on a panel that's discussing the occult underbelly of 19th century Europe?
So, basically, to kind of explain my idea, I'll use a very famous phrase from Hamlet, where Hamlet is talking with Horatio, say, there are more things between heaven and earth than can dream it, your philosophy. Anything that is not easily explained by people normally are put on the big bag called occult. That has happening for centuries, and sometimes that is nothing more than something that we don't have the knowledge yet. Um, that has happening for quite some time. Of course, that there is another big bag that people put things that when they are not going for the occult, they are going for the religion. So it's basically everything that people are not able to explain, they are putting one of these two bags. And of course, that if you are going for the religion and the religion is sociable, acceptable, yeah, basically everything's okay. Yeah, it's a miracle or something like that. If it's something that society normally does not accept that very well, it's occult, and then you are kind of outcasted from the society itself. So it's quite common that the occult goes normally outcasted. Uh, that's why we have all the ideas of hermits that are, you know, that has quite a lot of knowledge, and they are normally only sharing with that ones that are courageous enough, and brave enough to go out there to try to find that knowledge.
Okay. And CJ, I put the words occult and underbelly together. What comes up for you?
I have a more scientific base to look at the words. Occult is in Latin means hidden or secret, and underbelly is something clandestine, something hidden. So for me, when I hear occult underbelly, my first thought is secret societies and every knowledge that is trying to be kept away from the general view. Um, and by occult meaning secret, the more we know, just as Cussa was saying, the more we know, the less is occult. So, to be true, the occult is some kind of a finite, uh, some we are slowly chipping away.
Okay. And because we have a little bit of time here, I mean, I'll just throw in my 2 cents if the three of you don't mind necessarily. Um, I do tend to think of something criminal when I hear the word underbelly, especially. That to me signifies the the layer beneath the surface of society, the things we don't necessarily see happening on a daily basis, the movers, the shakers that are making things work kind of outside of public view. And within that, I mean, the occult, at least in our world, is kind of fraught with, um, well, people who are seeking after genuine knowledge and people who are seeking to get their hands on other people's wallets. And so I look at kind of both of those. And I mean, in some cases, people are using occult knowledge to try and get into people's wallets. Other times, people are offering occult knowledge as a way of getting at other people's wallets. And so that's what it tends to come to for me. I tend to, when I see the words occult and underbelly put together, when I initially saw this panel, the first thing I started thinking about was the fact that our world's occult is full of grifters and con artists. And but in the midst of that, there are also genuine people who are trying to learn and better themselves and maybe find a different way of understanding the world. And that has been the case, well, since since ancient times. I mean, there have been charlatans and the like. So I look back on that, and I'm trying to kind of reconcile that. I suppose why I'm coming here and why I'm wanting to ask you all questions is because I want to reconcile those ideas with the ideas of the Vaesen role-playing game, specifically a world where the things of folklore, the things that are supernatural, are very much real. And I'm wondering kind of how that changes things when we look at the occult through that lens. And so with that, if you'll permit me, I'll go into kind of my next question here. So my next question kind of has to do with our subtitle, sort of the dark aspects of history, myth, and folklore. One thing that we were definitely talking about prior to this panel was that Vaesen makes a point of stepping back from morality, from not making moral judgments about the supernatural. These creatures, these beings are not human, and they're not of the human world, but that doesn't make them good or bad. And just because humans are of the human world, that doesn't make them good or bad. There's no assignment of morality. That's really left to the game that you're playing. but yet we have this word kind of dark that we've been told to play with in this panel. So what does dark mean in a role-playing game where the supernatural isn't necessarily good or evil? How do you bring dark to Vaesen? And Cussa, how about you go first this time?
I think that it bringing horror to the game, and I think that that's kind of what will be directing for this dark tone.
Mhm.
There are several things that can be done. It can be by the way that the GM express himself. It can be by the way that he's telling the story. It can be by the story itself. Of course, can be a conjunction of all of that at the same time. One thing, for example, that I did some kind of quick course for people that were trying to run Vaesen for one event that happened some time ago on, I think, the January. I was talking exactly about that. I love Vaesen, and I really like, for example, to use descriptive things in a way that speaking slowly give time for the mind of the players to create that, the image that they are putting in. Normally that image will always be worse than what I'm describing, of course, because it's the tone of the game. And if you are kind of removing the moral judgments, as you mentioned, you can go with even kind of more crazier or strange descriptions that are trying to rely on just kind of the primal fears that we have. The human itself has a primal fear of the dark because we never know what is there. Nowadays, we are not used to that anymore because we are living in cities that have light in every street. But if you look that back, you never know what is waiting for you on the corner. Could be even another human, but on the middle of the night, when someone is kind of came towards you and you are just kind of feeling something entering on your belly and your bloody going away, there is no time to kind of rationalize that kind of thing that is happening exactly. So sometimes it's even easier to believe that that thing is just something instead of a human.
I tend to agree with you there. I think that, and I like your idea that the player kind of brings the dark with them. Maybe you give them cues a little bit, but you allow them to bring their own ideas. I can remember a recent incident where I was on a train platform and there was only I thought I was alone until I looked over to my left and at a far bench I hadn't noticed them because they'd sort of blended in with the trash can. They kind of had a black coat. And there was a trash bin that was just next to them. But another person stood up. And I remember that just kind of shocked the hell out of me. And it was 10 o'clock at night. I thought I was the only one taking this train. And yeah, no, to suddenly not have, to suddenly expect to be by yourself and then you're not by yourself.
There's also the opposite side of that. It's the whole thing of clothes on a chair at night in the bedroom. You just see the shadow of the clothes. So your mind then plays the opposite trick. It's like, oh my god, there is somebody here with me when there isn't. So
yeah, I think that's I want to say there are authors that refer to that as the eerie. That is the notion of eerie. You either expect something and there is nothing, or you expect nothing and there is something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so Cussa's approach then allow the player to bring the dark with them and just use your descriptive tools. CJ, how do you bring the dark to Vaesen?
My approach is very similar to Cussa. You say my approach is the human is nearly always afraid of what they don't know. And by definition, the player in Vaesen don't know what they are up against. New players and new characters don't know anything about Vaesen, they are blank sheets. The players, if they want, can have some kind of history, and they can bring in some kind of their dark secret into what they have experienced with the Vaesen. Besides that, it is setting the tone, setting an expectation that this is dangerous. It is always going to be dangerous to be a human in a world where the supernatural is lurking behind every door and behind every tree.
Okay. So yeah, very much kind of the same idea that the dark is something that is it's out there that's a little that's something that's unknown. And I think I'll bring this to you now, David, and I'll kind of add a little caveat to it maybe. Just to see if we could push this a little further. Let's go back to kind of the title of this panel, to the subtitle. What are dark aspects of history, myth, and folklore? What differentiates dark history from regular history? What differentiates dark myth and dark folklore from regular folklore? And if we're going to bring those aspects, if those things are relevant, which those things are relevant to Vaesen, I mean, we're talking about 19th century Nordic horror, so those aspects are relevant. How do we bring those? How do we bring dark history, myth, and folklore to Vaesen?
First things first is you watched the panel that was before this.
I unfortunately did not.
Neither did I, but I remember. I think the title was something about dark folklore.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, if I'm wrong, correct me. Building. Okay, I got the wrong.
The community one. Okay,
it was the community one. Okay, thank you, Dave.
The dark community.
Yeah,
We've got a dark. The other thing you can do for this is you can have a dark voice in the void who just appears every now and then and tells you when you're wrong. Thank you, Dave.
Oddly enough, I find Dave's dark voice in the void comforting.
Yeah, wait till you find Tom's voice in the void. Tom, that's creepy. Tom is amazing. We love Tom. He's in the chat. No offense, Tom, but your radio voice is creepy. So what is dark history and what is dark folklore? For me, dark folklore. So I'll focus on the folklore because dark history can be a bit of a personal opinion, I suppose, to some extent. But dark folklore, for me, would be the folklore that represents the darker side of the human psyche. So folklore is a way for us, or a way for people in the past to deal with certain aspects of life, certain realities that they don't have an explanation for, or certain ways to scare children from not going into the lake because there's a big monster there. But then you get things like your sleep paralysis demons. This to me is dark folklore because it's dealing with a psychological issue that I suffer from myself. I have really bad sleep paralysis, but the stories then kind of build up from, oh my god, I'm asleep, therefore I can't. As we're talking about the darkness, something in the darkness has come to me, has pinned me down and is attacking me, and I don't know what it is. So again, it's that kind of unknown aspect. So I think the thing that's connecting all of these discussions about the dark is the unknown. Like the greatest fear is the fear of the unknown. And so if you want to bring darkness, bring unknown stuff to it, you don't always have to tell your players what's going on. You can just drop the hints of something is going on in the background that is not going well. But the less you give them, the better, to some extent. It makes the reveal a little bit more creepy because, like, oh, I'm walking into the undercroft of the church. I know there's something down here, but nobody wants to talk about it, but we need to solve it. And you go down there, and then there's just a little cat sat there looking at you. It's like, well, that's a bit creepy. So it's hiding the right amount of unknown stuff, I feel. In dark history, well, you can get things like Jack the Ripper, or you can go into guy who did people on stakes that I've forgotten the name of in Hungary. Why have I forgotten his name? Inspiration for Dracula.
Even?
Yeah. Brain. It's been a long week. But yeah, so
right.
you've got random bits of dark history like that. Yeah. So
dark history makes me think of the Burke and Hare crimes.
That's very dark
and
history.
I mean that is and that's an unknown as well if you think about it, because I mean no one understood other than the anatomy students why people were taking bodies. It's really about kind of it sounds like everybody's kind of lack of knowledge, either lack of knowledge from a historical perspective where you role play somebody who doesn't have knowledge, or player lack of knowledge seems to be kind of where we land with this.
And I think as well, just as that ties in really well with the occult, because the occult is that unknown knowledge, that forbidden knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and we're definitely going to get there. Here's something that kind of I wanted to grab and bring to you folks, just because I think this is. I'll admit that I'm relatively new to Vaesen compared to some folks that are here. I mean, I'm a folklorist, and that's kind of my academic background, so that's why I'm here. But I mean, as far as the game itself, I'm new to it. And one thing that's kind of grabbed me as interesting is that Vaesen is a world where you have human and supernatural characters that have different cultural norms and practices. I mean, it can be something as simple as human beings want to chop down the tree because it happens to be in the way of the field they want to plow, versus versus like the ashwife who wants to maintain the tree because that is sacred and important to her. Probably a lot of interactions between PCs and Vaesens that they are hunting or trying to understand could be chalked up to misunderstandings. Is the dark occult just a misunderstanding between two cultural groups occupying the same space and dimension? CJ, let's start with you on this one.
From my view, it depends a lot of the Vaesen. Some Vaesen will move after the humans for something. Something like vampires. They are out for a quick lunch and perhaps a doggy bag, or perhaps the Nissen. Nissen is where the Nissen are, and it has happened to be where the humans moved to. So it depends a lot of the Vaesen in focus, but for the Vaesen where the humans went to, like, for the Vaesen where the human went to where the Vaesen were, it is a lot about being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and not understanding what powers it is you are disturbing.
Cussa, your thoughts?
It's interesting that you use the word misunderstanding, while I think that we can use another word, and it's perspective, because misunderstanding gives the impression that one of the sides are right, and that's not exactly true every time. Maybe it's just a point that maybe both are right on their own perspectives. Maybe even looking to each other perspective, they could understanding the reasons why that is behind, but they still want their perspective to have more value than the others. For example, the situation that you mentioned about the ash wife and the tree. If a person says that, okay, this tree is secret to me, that's why I don't want you to destroy it, humans could understand that. They still want to plow the field, so they still want to remove the tree from there. So I think that misunderstanding gives this impression, at least for me, that at some point it's not exactly the point that I think that the game tried to bring. I think that the game tried to put players and their characters try to see things with another eyes. Most of the times, Vaesen conflicts are not solved with combat, and quite a lot of times depends on the stories that you are creating. They are not even caused by Vaesen itself, so there is a little bit more complications under that is not exactly can be misunderstood. Just to be clear, can be, but most of the times just seems to me some kind of different perspectives of same matter.
All right, and I agree with you there that I mean definitely you could use different words to describe that. I mean, and we did go over that kind of in our previous chat that some words are words we want to make use of, some words not necessarily. It really kind of depends on who's comfortable with what. But using Cussa's words then, so is the David, is the dark occult just a matter of conflicting perspectives? Could we chalk it up to just that?
That's a philosophical question. I feel that involves a couple of years worth of study. But on a quick answer, that we'll stick with the occult. We've had some nice concepts about Vaesen there, but the occult, I would say yes, it's definitely perspective. The reason it's underground and it's not kind of modern stuff that we all know is because the church don't want you to know. From their perspective, this knowledge is not good. And so they're like, yeah, no, we're going to ban all these books. We're going to ban you looking at science. We're going to ban you from doing maths. And then in the 1500s, a load of Germans were like, hang on a minute, we want to do this. And so they took a different perspective. They thought that they could get closer to God by looking at the sciences and by looking at the things the church was not wanting them to. So it's two different perspectives of looking at the same thing. One was purely religious, and one was coming at it from a scientific point of view. And then you end up with occult sciences and alchemy and hermetic orders and things. And I guess we'll come to those at some point. But for me, as a very, very basic, simple thing, occultism is a different perspective of looking at the world and looking at religion, because you're not following a dogma, which is another perspective. Which is pretty much kind of life, isn't it? Is we all view life with different perspectives. We all view this conversation with a different perspective and come from different places. So
true. No, and I mean, as I mentioned in our conversation, I did have a wonderful instructor named Sabina Magliocco. She's teaching at the University of British Columbia now, but her specialty was in modern witchcraft and modern kind of Wicca traditions. And the practitioners there, and she frequently referred to the occult or different perspectives of the occult as other ways of knowing.
Yeah.
And so I think, and also I think you add an interesting wrinkle there in that you could have a situation of the dark occult where really it's just about two human groups having a disagreement over perspective, and the Vaesen is just caught in the middle.
Yeah. Like, we want to summon this. We've got a Vaesen problem. It's doing this. Maybe it's a church grim. Maybe it's a Nisse. Maybe it's something else. One group has gone down a certain study of books and they've discovered a certain ritual that gets rid of it. Another group has gone down another route and found a different version. And you've kind of got this conflict of, we want to save it, we want to banish it. Different perspectives.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to move ahead here a little bit. I'll jump around a little bit with my segments because I think kind of what you're all talking about with perspective. I like that, and I want to add, and there was a question I did want to bring up a little bit, because one thing that's curious about, well, and I mean, I suppose you get this with a lot of horror role-playing games, is you end up with these dichotomies, and definitely one that I could see that's rather strong in Vaesen is the kind of the city knowledge or urban knowledge and rural knowledge. You have, I mean, at least from the outset, the idea that the Thursday's children and their society are based in the city, and perhaps they might be solving problems in the city, but they might also be moving to the countryside to look at these things. And so, with that, I'm curious to talk about the occult underbelly in different environments. What is different or distinct about occult knowledge that's obtained in an urban environment versus occult knowledge that is obtained in a rural environment? When we think about the occult underbelly, are we more likely to relate it to an urban setting or a rural setting? And why or why not? And I think who should be starting this? Maybe Cussa, you started the last one, right? I think. Okay. CJ, do you want to go first with this?
Sure.
The urban environment, the rural environment, and the occult underbelly.
Yeah.
What's your thought? What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts, it's for me, Vaesen is typical more rural in approach, because the traditions, the history of Vaesen and all the culture around that is more relayed through mouth to mouth in the rural areas, where I imagine, and how I have studied around the urban in this period, is that the occult took more organized approach, like the secret societies I have been talking about in my intro, um, where they in the rural areas have been taught the respect for the Vaesen. Like, you have to remember to give the Nisse its porridge, or it will get mad. Where they in the city, my view is they more study what this occult is and how to affect it and how to use it. I hope I answered the question. I lost track of the
I
question
think
somewhere.
you've provided kind of an idea that the difference between the occult in a rural and urban environment is one of respect and perhaps appreciation and maybe careful reverence to avoid offending, versus the urban is more inclined, the urban occult is more inclined towards study and manipulation. Is this kind of where you were going with that?
Yeah,
Is
somewhere
that
like that.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's a perfectly reasonable perspective. I'm interested to actually, David, do you want to pick this up and maybe also, given the fact that you have some familiarity with, well, experience or some knowledge with regard to certain hermetical traditions and the like, can you speak to the urban and rural in light of what in light of your interest in occult history?
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of taking what CJ just said, but applying different terminology to it. So to me, occultism would be more urban. It would be more in your centers of learning. Because if we think about occultism as hidden knowledge, especially in the way that it's viewed in the modern world, it is written down, studied, practiced knowledge. So in terms of occultism, it's a highly ritualistic, highly ceremonial practice in the cities. So we're looking at ritual magic, ceremonial magic, lots of as we used to call the Catholics, the smells and bells. It's walking around in robes, forming your pentacle circles and things, studying your grimoires. The ancient grimoires, King Solomon, Hesekiah Solomon, and the Red Grimoire and stuff like that. Whereas if you go to the rural side, it's a lot more animistic. It's a lot more connected to nature. It's passed down through oral traditions, as CJ said, but it's that connection and respect to nature the spirits exist in the plants, they exist in the rocks, they exist in the waters and the hills, and you're calling upon them. And just by having a conversation with them, that's where the occult knowledge comes from. By just walking up and talking, you're not doing any 9 day rituals to cleanse the body before you can go summon a demon. You're just walking into the woods and going, "Hi, tree. Do you mind if I take a bit of your sap today to make my porridge sweet?" So there's this whole, to me, that's the whole difference. It's almost like the occult in the cities has become a scientific experiment, whereas in the woods it's just like a conversation.
And there's something I kind of want to dig into a little bit with this, but you've kind of thrown me a curveball here with with your perspective.
Sorry.
I mean, would you say no? That's a good thing. I want to be surprised. Believe me, this is my opportunity to learn from all of you. Is the way that I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about then is, and Cussa, I will get to you. Actually, I'm going to give you the last word on this one. But David, since you did want to kind of talk a little bit about the hermetic stuff and things like that, with regard, are there certain types of kind of Vaesen experiences one would only have in a city? Is there something? Does the urban bring with it its own supernatural ecosystem, or do you think that the urban cuts its residents off from the natural from the supernatural ecosystem?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So I not only read a lot of the stuff based on the Lesky of Solomon and the ritualistic side, so read a lot of stuff of folk magic and things, and a lot of modern folk magic and things do talk about the urban environment and how you can do traditional witchcraft within cities. There's also a lot of folklore within cities. So in Manchester, where I used to live in England, there are stories of monsters under the sewers. There's Ginny Greenteeth, who appears in the city as well. Also, ghosts. Ghosts are in the city. We've got ghosts in Vaesen. So I don't think it cuts it off. What I do think it does is change the way you deal with them and where you would experience them. For me, so we've already you talked about the train station. And to me, that is somewhere like late at night at a train station in a liminal space within a city is where you would have these things. Places which feel off and don't have many people. So you could be walking around and you could find a Nisse under a street lamp in the middle of a park at midnight because that's the time that it's safe to be there for them. Because there's no people around. They've just they had their home there and the city grew up around it and they couldn't leave. So you just have to kind of think about a different way of why they're trapped in the city and how you'd meet them. And I think liminality and bringing in the idea of this odd place. Underpasses are really good for this. Going into an underpass late at night, light flickers, do you catch something running across the street? And as Tom says in the chat, rat kings, New York rat kings. I saw a rat a couple of days ago in Mexico as well. That big. I almost thought I saw a chupacabra, and it's like huge. So, yeah, cities you can definitely bring Vaesen in. You just have to slightly change the way you think about it.
Okay.
And I'm guessing Cussa would have a lot of input on this as well.
All right. Well, and that's actually, Cussa, if I could go to you as kind of our final say, urban or rural, which is better? No, I'm not asking that. But what I'm asking is, how is it different, and how do we approach the occult and underbelly in urban and rural settings?
So I'll just start with something that it's quite interesting, and it's etymology. Basically, everybody knows nowadays the word paganism, and of course that there was a kind of reconstruction about that word that means today means that you are not a Christian person. But that word came from the word paganus in Latin. That basically means someone that is a villager, someone that lives in a rural area. So all the pagan traditions, at some perspective, they started somehow in a rural area where there was no civilization. And in reality, if we stop to think, every place was at some point a rural area. So the fact that you said, for example, that the cities, grow around the vase and they were not able to escape that area seems very interesting, because that's basically a very interesting way to look to this perspective. As David said, look into the mystical things and the real occult that we have nowadays, and getting that as a kind of almost as a scientific experiment. And basically, if you look for some of the most complex books that are there for this kind of things, like the Solomon grimoire or for the Abramelin grimoire, exactly, basically they are, at some perspective, looks like almost scientific experiments. The same can go for the alchemy information that we have access. Mix salt with part of gold, 2 ounces of copper, and this kind of thing, to try to get something from that. So if you look to that, that is the primordials of the scientific things that we have nowadays. The only difference is that it's kind of interesting, because on the past we were kind of going to the nature to take our medicines and this kind of thing. Several people went to the fire because of this kind of knowledge. And at some perspective nowadays, we are doing kind of the same thing. Sometimes it's a little bit different. You instead of getting directly from the plant, you are kind of creating some kind of chemical product based on the knowledge that you already have. But on the final, it's the same thing. They are just coming from different places. So saying that one is better than other, it's a little bit complicated for me, because at some point for me, they are just kind of different perspectives of the same knowledge.
Okay, so they feed into one another is what I'm hearing, which is great there. Okay, we will kind of revisit some of the occult and science stuff in a moment, but first I want to take a detour, and it's my prerogative because I'm the moderator here, so I want to talk about my favorite subject with the occult, which is at the moment grifters, hucksters, and con artists. So we live in a world where of materialism, of as Cussa was talking about, like chemistry, biology, physics. I mean, these are the things that create our medicine, that create our kind of our world around us. And so consequently, our occult space, our occult knowledge space, is littered with grifters and charlatans. Offering things that don't have anything to do with science, that are really just about, separating you from your money somehow. Meanwhile, the world of Vaesen is one where the supernatural is entirely real. Our culture of occult, again, has these kind of hangers-on, these grifters, these charlatans, these figures that are always trying to put one over on people. I mean, it seems like every other week another one comes up, another cult leader or somebody like that who's offering secret knowledge to people, but is really just trying to get sex, power, and money in one order or another. What is Vaesen's culture of the occult like? Is it also plagued with con artistry? Does something replace the charlatans? Why or why not? Let's see. Let's start with David this time.
I think that they still exist.
Okay.
In the Vaesen world, there's very much still going to be charlatans and con artists and people just out there to get your money, because Vaesen is only for people who have been given the sight.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have had the traumatic experience. You have to have gone through something to be able to see them. There may be people out there who might be able to tap into it to maybe do small spells and things. So we have the characters, we have the witch, and there's the cultists, and there's certain spells and things in there that not spells, certain talents and traits in there that can kind of lead to that. But these are very specific groups of people. So I still say this is 19th century at the moment Europe, but there's a very, very famous two sisters who started an entire movement on con artistry. The Fox sisters who went over to America and effectively started the spirituality movement are admitted con artists. So there's still going to be people like that around there who maybe have seen people talking to Vaesen but not seeing what they're talking to and go, I can take that on and I can use that and I can make money off people, because most of the time the people are the bad things in the world. We're the problem. At least that's how I tend to see Vaesen as a game. It's like usually humans are the problem. Let my players decide, but I drop the hints in that it's the people being bad. So yeah, I don't see a problem having con artists in there. And one of the good things you could do in a game is you could have a con artist going in trying to get your players to believe them, and then that your players end up kind of calling them out and putting them out. But actually, there was something pulling the con artist's strings. They just didn't realize it. So you could kind of layer on layer things. But yeah, I fully want people to bring in con artists and hacks and things within it, because it was very much a part of the time.
Okay. CJ, I'm seeing a lot of nodding from you, so I feel like you have something you want to add to this. So, Cussa, if you'll permit me to give you the final word yet again, CJ, what are your thoughts that you want to add here?
I'm a very big fan of making interesting NPCs, and when you're talking about drifters and con artists, it is making already my imagination going wild about how to make and real big con artists talking about, I see ghosts, I talk with dead, whatever, and then being taken advantage of by the players and say, no, there's not a ghost there, where the Sunday children can say, yes, there's a ghost right in front of you, just to make fun of the con artist. That would be my approach, was to use my players to make fun of my NPC con artist.
So the con artist kind of becomes a foil, sort of.
Yeah.
They're not a central villain necessarily, but they're a flavor text.
Yeah.
And maybe sort of something that creates a more rich and engaging story.
Yeah.
I've got the phrase, if it only wasn't for these, if it wasn't only for, what was it? If it only wasn't Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
I can't remember the phrase, but Scooby-Doo.
Kids.
Yeah, middling kids. That's why.
Yeah.
That's the image I suddenly had then.
Yeah, no, and of course, I mean, when I'm looking at this, I mean, the Fox sisters. That's actually an interesting. I'd spaced on them, but yeah, no, they have a very interesting and rich history. I know we had a little kind of back and forth about the controversial figure of Rasputin, and the nature of him being. I mean, I've always kind of seen him as a grifter and someone who's playing off the sensibilities of wealthy people. I see Aleister Crowley much in the same light. I see, I mean, perhaps he was after the knowledge and after interesting experiences, but he was also trying to graft money off of people constantly. Because, I mean, if there's no, I can't think of kind of an intrinsic way that your occult practice is going to produce money for you. I mean, so it has to end up being this kind of, I need a loan, I need, someone to back me, I need someone to financially support me while I make interesting prognostications, and we have parties where there's lots of sex and drugs, that sort of thing.
If you actually look at a lot of the Solomonic spells and texts and things, a lot of it is all about trying to get money out of people or find golden pots and stuff. So
okay.
It's inherent within occultism that people need money.
Good. That's actually going to lead to my next question there. But before that, I'm going to give Cussa the final word here. So, Cussa, on occult grifters, where do you land?
So it's interesting because there are con artists and grifters everywhere. And I think that's very important to say, not only on the occult side of the society, but basically on society in general. It can be, of course, that when you are talking about occult things or people doesn't have the knowledge, it's much easier for you to try to take money or advantage from them because they don't have the knowledge. So it's easier for you to say anything. And if you are a good con artist and you are saying that in a very convincing way, that's not exactly a problem. So that's the first thing. It's not only on occult side. There are con artists everywhere. Um, but I think that if we look to that kind of thing on Vaesen, it's quite interesting that I can say that there are, just adding to what people said here. Um, it's quite complicated because putting what is a con artist is a little bit complicated. Basically, if you have a villain that is just lying to the group and trying to convince the group that he's somebody that he's not, or that he's not the villain that is behind all the that is happening with the group and the Vaesen and the Setans kind of thing. Isn't he a kind of con artist too? There is this kind of thing. You can try, and as CJ mentioned earlier today, if you're not giving the players the information, as if they don't know who is behind the thing, that is still a kind of very interesting con art that you can have on your game.
Okay. All right. So my next question, I want to lead into well, a couple more topics here that we wanted to kind of talk about, or at least when I brought them up in our kind of pre-chat, there was definite interest here. So let's see. Let's start with this is kind of twin topics, but we'll start with the occult and science, which I think is kind of a critical thing. And I can already, I can see this has gotten David's attention. David, you're going to get the last word on this one, I've decided. So let's see. The history of our material world contains a lot of overlap between the occult and science. Is this true in the world of Vaesen as well? If so, how is the relationship between science and the occult changed by the fact that the supernatural is very real in the Vaesen setting? And CJ, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. By the book, you are told to study Vaesen. You go find books, you go find artifacts, and you will study them. You'll try to understand where these books come from, where these artifacts come from, and this investigation and this science in the world will help you improve your understanding of the world and the Vaesen inside it. Yeah. And I now trigger the question.
Yeah, no, if you could tell us how, okay, the fact that this is the world of Vaesen and not our world, how does that make the relationship between the occult and science different? So I think you've definitely demonstrated right off the bat that there is still a science that goes into that attaches itself to the occult with regard to the Vaesen world. But how would you say it's different than our world? Like, I mean, if science is born, if science was born out of occult sort of practices involving things like alchemy, or even just the study of astronomy and the like, well, and variety of other things as well. I mean, I'm just naming two things off the top of my head there. How's the world of Vaesen different? Because I mean, we do have that element in that the supernatural is incredibly real there. That has to change things somehow. At least in my mind, it has to change things.
And certainly, surely it does. Where in this world, the occult is an idea. We look at things, we can explain it, we give it a meaning, an explanation. In the real world, it is we know as men of science, some degree, we know that this is a stretch. We have to make some. We have to take some leaps and faith to make the goal and to make to the to get to the goal with our assumption. Where in the world of Vaesen, it is actually proof. There is actually proof that the porridge is eaten by a small humanoid being. There is actually proof that people disappear a lot in the Swedish forest. Where in the real world, you always know someone who knows somebody, somebody who have seen a Nisse. So in Vaesen, you are closer to the truth, where we in the real world have to make up the truth to get there.
So supernatural investigations have a little bit more scientific certainty then.
Yeah, you
in,
can
in the
actually.
Vaesen.
Yeah,
In
you can actually follow the clues to
yes.
the truth.
Cussa, your thoughts on the connections between the occult and science and how the setting of Vaesen shapes that
So,
relationship.
first of all, I want to remember that as any RPG, um, you as the GM, DM, narrator, or whatever name that you are using,
Hmm.
you are kind of the god of that word. This means that whatever the book is saying, you can change. You can basically make that totally different. And for example, that's sometimes even expected. So basically, if some players read something, you are able to catch them off guard. And even if they say something like, "Oh, but the book says that," to say which book? Oh, this book here. This book does not exist on this game world. So you don't
Hmm.
know that. Your player does not know that. So that's the first thing. There is another thing that I think that it's very important to mention, that it's written on the book, that Vaesen, although it's kind of based on the 19th century of Sweden, there are some kind of they already say that it's a little bit changed. In the 19th century, you didn't have a camera. Yeah, you had. It was something so big that if you kind of walk with that from one place to another, that would not be viable. And trying to take photos for helping your investigation, that would not be feasible. You would have to walk with something so big, and that will not be practical. So, at some perspective, the word itself of Vaesen is already not like ours.
Hmm.
Even going a little bit further, the gender roles and this kind of thing, the book itself says that they break that. So the word of
Hmm.
Basin is not like ours. It's kind of based on ours. It have several similarities. It's not our word. And when you look to that, this means that you, as the person that is responsible for the game, you are able to change anything. And if you look at about how that connection about these words and science and all this kind of thing happens, that can that can be totally dependent on the table. For example, if you have a table, for example, if you were playing and I have, for example, someone like David on my table, probably I would kind of, maybe left some kind of interesting books, oh, you found the Abramelin Grimoire, and that kind of would bring something like a more scientific approach. If I had, for example, um, someone that, for example, knows a little bit or studied something like paganism, maybe I'll kind of throw that kind of thing on the table. It's basically trying to get to the attention of your players to create a world together with them, because at least from my perspective, RPG is a collaborative story. Although I can
Hmm.
kind of try to direct some points, my players can throw me totally out of the bridge from what I was thinking, and that perspective basically means that they have some ways to control the world too, and you basically can take whatever inspiration from our real world and bring to there, and kind of put some spice on that, make it bigger, make it stronger, because yeah, Vaesen exists. So yeah, werewolves exist, and they can be fucking amazing or fucking scary. Depends totally on what you want to put on your table.
So you're almost suggesting allow your players to establish the relationship between the occult and science. I like
I
that.
don't see any problem on that.
Oh no,
actually.
I don't either. I'm just kind of trying to parrot your words back to you to make sure that I've got it here. What you
Yeah,
have in mind.
I think that kind of works very well. Of course, that you can put some limits, but
Mhm.
yeah, kind of creating collaborative probably will make them more interested on that than you could do alone by yourself.
Okay. And David, again, given that we're kind of in your wheelhouse here, and this is the I'm not asking for a lecture necessarily, but if you could fill us in, if you have some interesting historical tidbits that you'd like to bring in regarding the relationship between the occult and science, things that you think would be interesting for our viewers to know, let us have it.
So-
What's the final word here?
Well, I was going to come at it rather than from a historical point of view, just kind of give you some ideas. So I am an astrophysicist. I work at the university here studying magnetic fields. So science is one of my it's my life. And outside of my life, I read occult books, so occult science. But what I would do is kind of feeding off what Cussa said, is getting the players to kind of decide things is always fun. And you can drop those hints to it, because if you end up with someone who has the occultist trait, and then you've got someone who is the scientist or the lateral thinker, and you throw them into a group, or a group of NPCs, where one of the NPCs may be a hermeticist. And at the end of the 19th century, there was a book that was released. I'm probably going to pronounce the name of the book wrong because it's spelt funny, but it's called the Kybalion, Kybalion, I think. And this is a book of Hermetic philosophy. So Hermeticism is a type of occultism, Hermes Trismegistus and stuff like that. But we'll not get into the history of it. But Hermeticism is it's Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn. It's Aleister Crowley. It's all that lot. Aleister Crowley got thrown out of the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn by Yeats, I think. He threw him down a stair and broke his ankle. Random side fact for you. But in the Kybalion, they try to connect. So this is an actual book that was released in 1908. They connect the current scientific ideas to the ideas of Hermeticism. And this is to do with a concept at the time that was very, very popular within science, especially physics, called the aether, which is AETHER. And this was seen as a kind of a background force, a background field that permeated everything. And this was followed by almost all scientists at the time. It only kind of died out towards the end of the first World War, sorry. So even groups like Einstein would have heard of this and would have probably worked with it. And the first discoverers of the structure of the atom would have done. But you can take this idea of the aether, like the Hermeticists did, and you can apply, well, the aether is actually real, because this is Vaesen. And maybe one of the NPCs you meet tells your occultist player about this background field and this background place where maybe other creatures exist, and then you let them have an argument with a rationalist in the group. And you see how it plays out, and you let them decide it. One of the things I love about most Free League games is they specifically state it's the world that everybody builds together. It's a collaborative world building thing. Yes, there's a background to it, and yes, it's the 18th century Sweden, but you build it all together. So you can throw these things at them and you see what sticks. So for me, I would take real world ideas and see how your players deal with it. The other fun one to do, which all people always love to do to me because I'm an astrophysicist, is they like talking about astrology. And then I cry and run away.
See, with you, I'd want to talk about Jack Parsons, but he's a little later than
he's 1930s, yeah.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, a little later, but
yeah, he's a bit too late for this period. But you can take someone like Jack Parsons, and you can basically just transplant him.
Yes.
You can even look at someone
building aether rockets in their backyard.
Yeah. Even Newton was part of occult societies. He was a numerologist and things. So that's the other thing you can think of is numerology is still, even now, is still very much a thing within the occultists. So.
Well, and that was definitely a discussion that we had at one point about that, how there's so many that so many people who were at all learned had some touch point with the occult.
Yeah, I think that was CJ was talking about this.
Yeah, CJ. Yeah, the secret society type stuff. I mean, the fact that the secret societies were. I mean, they were like the gift card program or the points programs you get at your grocery store. That's kind of how I sort of think of it. They were just very common. Everybody was a member because there was no television or video games to distract people. So they had to find things to do. And, you want to get together with your friends or like-minded people and have a drink or something like that. So a secret society becomes a good opportunity, kind of a good starting point. And then from there, I mean, and I think it's fair to say that, a lot of deeper occult mysteries are not part of that, but it's a way to kind of introduce oneself to like-minded people and then move from there. So with that, we've probably got time for a couple more kind of quick round-robin conversations here. Unless there's any additional questions that we need to answer, because I haven't been keeping track. I know Dave's been keeping track. So, and because I'm selfish and I'm the moderator, we're going to get to the other one that I'm interested in first. Sorry, guys, but this is just something that kind of poked at me from the moment I saw the name on this panel. It just kind of needled me because, okay, we've got this relationship between the occult and science. We've also kind of established that there is a relationship between the occult and economics as well. I mean, in a lot of cases, you're joining you're looking for occult knowledge to better your financial standing. And also, I mean, the one thing about human beings, and we've definitely talked about the idea that human beings that they aren't they aren't all good in the world of Vaesen. And there's nothing human beings won't exploit. What's that?
In real words too, just to mention.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing about the real world is that there's no resource that human communities won't figure out how to exploit for their benefit, for their economic benefit. And so with that, I want to talk about the relationship between economics and the supernatural in the world of Vaesen. What does the relationship between the occult and economics look like? I mean, again, from my perspective, I almost picture things, I picture things like black market swap meets between sorcerers looking to sell little bottled conjurations or the like, or bottled creatures that they've captured. I mean, we've mentioned the bookstore that appears on the night of the blood moon and that sort of thing. Cussa, why don't you start us off here? What is the relationship between economics and the occult in the world of Vaesen? What does that look like in your mind? What do you picture?
I'll use without kind of mentioning names because we don't want to spoil the fun. What I'll say is that there are some written adventures for Vaesen, even from Freylig, that plays very, very well with this concept. Things like, okay, if you kind of banish the Vaesen, you banish the Vaesen, and all the economic of that place goes hell. And on the other side, if you kind of
get rid of the Vaesen and suddenly the crops won't grow anymore. You're that sort of situation.
Exactly. And this is something that it's very, very, very interesting. There was one adventure that I played with some players that we touched exactly that. They were on the exactly point that they had to choose if they would just go there and banish the Vaesen and let kind of have to close because there were no good customers anymore and this kind of thing, or if on the opposite side they should accept that the Vaesen were there that they were not kind of hurting anybody, and on the opposite side, when they were kind of happy with how they were being treated, they kind of make the inn kind of prosperous. So
Okay.
of course there is several nuances that you as the DM can use on
Hmm.
the perspective of good Vaesen, or even on the opposite side, basically having Vaesen that are, especially if we're talking about cities and all these, let me say this way, conflict that you have between the Vaesen and the city that is growing and taking the place from the Vaesen, especially the Vaesens that you have on the book, and you can put that the Vaesens are kind of trying to destroy the city part of the things, and so the GM can kind of play in that in so many ways, or even going from the human nature, as we were saying, baby is a human that he's doing something on, one farmer owner doing something on the other farm, just to kind of make the Vaesen angry on that farm so he can profit better because he will have the crops and the other guy not. So there are any ways that you can use that.
Fair enough.
Sorry, players, I know that will make your lives worse on the next games. It's this guy's fault.
Um, David, your thoughts on on economics and the occult in the world of Vaesen?
I'm going to give one phrase. I'm going to keep this one short, and then I'll let CJ talk because I've spoken a lot. Goblin market.
Yeah, no, I was that was one that came to mind as well. Thank you.
Yeah,
CJ,
that's
last
it. Just
word. Oh, no worries. CJ, you have the last word on economy and the occult in the world of Vaesen. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think Cussa covered it very well. So that part I won't add on to. But I think it is a very interesting part to think about the secret societies and how they help its people, its members in this world. So if you take the Sunset Children, it can be anyone. You could put them inside a big fine manor, and they work, they earn money, and that helped them grow. It helped them with their economics. It also relates to other secret societies and groups in this world who take advantage of the Vaesen into some regard. Otherwise, I don't have any more than what Kusa said.
Well, that's okay. We are actually coming down to the end here, I think. I think we've got about 15 minutes, a little less. So I would like to end on kind of, this is partially a creative exercise, but also maybe a little bit of you could throw in some additional information if you have thoughts. But I would be curious to see where we go with this. So this will be kind of our last topic. The phrase dark occult or occult underbelly naturally conjures up certain tropes that we're all familiar with. Moldy medieval grimoires, alchemical potions that provide superhuman powers or wealth, secret societies that are pulling levers behind levers of power behind the scenes. But these are all obvious. We've all seen these before. What are some less obvious tropes of the dark occult that we can share with viewers here? Because Vaesen is a world where the supernatural is real. Might we find the dark occult in some stranger or more unexpected places than the ones we already know about from books, movies, and television? So this is the creative exercise portion of the panel. I mean, I've already mentioned the train station, and I think we ran with that, and that was interesting. But yeah, if each of you could provide maybe one or more thoughts on an unusual place where the dark occult touches the world of Vaesen. And I see pondering, I see thinking right here. So I'm going to open this up to whoever wants to speak first.
Just to be clear, you are asking for something Vaesen related.
Something not typical, something that
Okay.
you would find not typical in terms of a dark occult trope.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, our common ones, the stuff that we already think about, the moldy grimoires, the alchemical potions, the secret societies, leaning on the power structure. These are all things that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
Let's give them
Sorry.
something different. What's something different that you can offer?
I have one. I just have to
Go right
say,
ahead, CJ. You're
yeah.
first.
One of my players have to mute me because he's in the chat and he can hear this. Så Sebastian, sluk den mikrofon. So
10, 9,
yeah.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No spoilers. Go.
Yeah. One of my big thoughts is, what if Vaesen is fighting each other for human? Like there is law about Nissa. My big passion is Nissa. And there is law in Denmark about Nissa who have been fighting each other because their landlord, their human, is fighting. So every night they go fight each other, which result in hay bales on rooftops and broken wagons and everything, and people can't understand what is happening. And yeah, that's not so dark. It is just very strange and not so
I agree.
typical scene.
But
Have
no,
you read?
I mean, we definitely had the thought of like the two farmers having the argument and trying to one up each other. There's no reason that we can't go that direction. So with just two people having a disagreement. So in your conception, then the sort of the strange place that the Vaesen pop up is in the internal drama between two people.
Yeah.
Okay. A disagreement, an argument leaves
Yeah.
the two Nissa to have to battle one another over the two competing sides of their kind of favored human beings.
Yeah. Just, the history is short. Who's told, which is told in Denmark, is there's two people who is both going to be the leader of the church in this area, and they are both fighting each other with dirty tricks, and this to affect the Nissa because they think, of course, my human is the right human, and then they get annoyed at each other and start fighting. And because Nissa is in Danish law very strong, uh, it's it get very messy, and people on the area can't understand it because they don't believe in Nissa. So suddenly the cow is on the roof top of the church and anything because they don't clean up after themselves.
I'm suddenly picturing two kind of fairy creatures involving themselves in like something like a U.S. mayoral election or something like that in the 1800s, something like that. Like, I mean, you have the whole, you know, we talk about kind of the idea that it's hard to get the Vaesen into the city, but I mean, why couldn't you have somebody or even kind of a generational Vaesen or a Vaesen who's attached to a family end up working either for or against Tammany Hall in New York in the 1850s. It's
A
an
nice
interesting
friendly
thought.
boggart, a family boggart has come along, and you've managed to
Exactly,
convince him.
someone who's come along on the ship and
Yeah.
has ended up working for, yeah, no, exactly, and suddenly they involve themselves in a situation that's not unlike that. Well, a setting not unlike the one where the film Gangs of New York takes place.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's very interesting because in Denmark we have a word that says "nissen" follows you. It means every time you move in Denmark, your nisse is moving with you. So if you have a bad relation with your nisse, your bad relation moves with you. You can't move from in Denmark you can, in Sweden you can, but in Denmark you can't move from your nisse. So if you move to the city and you have a good nisse, you have good luck, good prosperity. Have you been bad to your nisse, you take it with you.
Wherever you go, it follows you.
Yeah, it's the same with the boggart in UK. But
Or
no,
David,
go ahead.
thoughts on, and do you want to add something here with an idea as far as like a a new place, something different, something that's kind of either against or different from the tropes that we know for the dark.
I have an idea. I'll let Cussa go first.
Okay, Cussa, go ahead.
If you have an idea, that is.
Yes. So there is something that came to my mind when you were talking, and I think that it's a full menu for having strange things happening, especially if you think on that on 19th century. Is circus. Circus was normally just a community of outcasted people for one reason or another.
Hmm.
They are a very good place for you even to hide some kind of Vaesen in front of everyone in front of everyone's eyes in plain
Put them in
sight.
clown makeup and no one would know.
Exactly. And I would even say that going from what we were saying before, you can have the con artists, you can have people trying to, feel the hand of economy on a city that they are being presented. You can have several kind of basins maybe fighting for the control of the circles and this kind of thing. So a circus is a kind of very I don't think that there is anything like that. These TM, so there is some trademarking here. Putting now on this video, we'll be creating that kind of idea. But yeah,
All right, we
that
look
that is a
forward to Cusa's upcoming scenario.
yeah,
So,
it's a full menu of ideas.
yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about a scenario me and Tom are writing for Modern Vesen, but I love that idea of using a circus. That's a brilliant idea.
Actually, the circus could also, I mean, another thing that you could do, I've definitely seen this in other games, the circus could be the center of the investigative society, and that would allow them to move around and experience different Vaesen in different places even.
That would
The
be awesome.
circus can be the Vaesen.
Yeah. There we go. It's the tent.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into Lovecraftian territory. This is feeling like home to me. But David, do you have a thought you want to share, an idea for an unconventional dark occult trope, a place where the dark occult can emerge, where maybe we haven't thought about it before?
So this is one thing about Vesen is it's very Nordic horror. It's very folklore, which means it's very countryside related.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about the city, but the other thing that is happening at this period of time in Europe is the Industrial Revolution. There are factories, vast ironworks, huge, noisy places where we would typically not expect Vesen to turn up because, oh my God, Vesen don't like iron. Like, well, how about an iron foundry which is building occult railways? The railway tracks have occult symbols on them because they're trying to clear out a patch. And then the Vesen are like, hang on a minute, no, we know where the problem is now. It's not where they're building it, it's where they're making the tracks. And then you end up you bring the Vesen from the countryside into an industrial area. One of the things that was actually we were talking about, me and Tom in the chat, is industrial espionage and industrial sabotage by Vesen. So my mind then went into, this is the Industrial Revolution. There's going to be factories, there's going to be waterworks, there's going to be mills and things. You can bring in the Vesen into those because these are not things
part of the raw materials.
Yeah.
They could even be absorbed into the factory works. I mean,
yeah,
you could have that suddenly that ashwife's tree could suddenly end up on the pile, ready to go in and become coke,
or become a chair,
Sure. What happens then? Okay. Well, I think these are three. If nothing else, we have provided 3 excellent starter ideas for anyone looking to create a scenario. We have an argument, a circus, and a factory. All places that you wouldn't expect to find the supernatural, but you absolutely could, as it turns out. With that, I see we've only got a couple minutes more, so I'm going to throw it to you all to reintroduce yourselves one more time, plug your socials, plug any projects that are upcoming, and then we will depart. So let's start with David.
Okay, cool. Yep, I'm David. Half of the not half, I suppose. One of the writers behind Modern Vesen, where we just basically made Vesen in modern society. So a lot of these ideas we've actually talked about here. You can find my socials as The Drunken Storyteller on various places, which includes a podcast where I occasionally do stuff on folklore. Also today, a couple of hours ago today, I think it was about 2:00 this afternoon, my time, which is God knows what time that is. I'm in Mexico, so Mexico time is what we'll say. A new project was released. This is for a different game. It's not Vesen. It's for Scion from Free League Publishing, and it's Scion Pride, where we have done an LGBT.
Next path, no.
It's a community content.
Okay.
Community content. We've queered Scion. So there's some queer gods and queer things going on in there, and it got released today. All of the profits go to charity as well.
Excellent. And we
So
can
go
find
check
you
that out.
at under David Whitworth in Drive-Thru RPG. Is that correct?
Yeah, David Whitworth on Drive-Thru RPG.
Yes, and otherwise the Drunken Storyteller for your podcast.
Yes, yeah,
very
and
good.
Socials and stuff.
Yeah, Cussa.
So thank you, everybody. I'm Cussa, working as a developer for some time, working as studying runes for some time, and creating things for Foundry. You can find me as Kusamitri, Instagram, Discord, Twitter, and Telegram. And you can find my models on hotpub.com. Is where basically I'm putting some things, and I'm hoping that at some point we'll get some agreement with Free League to bring community content to Foundry too.
Great. And CJ.
Yeah, I'm CJ. Also, my name is Christian. This has been my first panel. It has been very interesting, and yeah, now I try to yeah. I have a degree in law and a very big interest in Vaesen and Nordic culture in general. As I'm Danish, um, I still don't have a very big social presence. But if anyone want my knowledge about Nissa or anything, anything like that, you can nearly always find me on my Discord tag CJ Schou, written like that. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Fantastic. And lastly, I'll just say I'm Stephen Wall. My project or imprint is Delapore Media. It's a blog where I have a variety of articles freely available on horror role playing and building better horror role playing games. I'm also about to release a piece of community content called Somebody Think of the Children. Little mock-up here just to show you. This is for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. Folks, it has been a real pleasure getting to know all of you and tapping a bit of your knowledge to discuss the occult underbelly of 19th century Europe and what that means for the Vaesen role-playing game. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to anyone who is watching now, watching later, anything like that. And enjoy your con. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.